and gentlemen, welcome to this Mr. Pandaria beta preview video. And in this video we're going to be taking a look at the 10-man normal mode version of Lei Shen in the Throne of Thunder raid. Now this is your last normal mode boss for the Throne of Thunder, and it's fun. We all enjoyed it. I mean, we had a great time on the PTR and we almost killed it. We came very close, as you'll see in this try and another try, so the fight's about 10 minutes long for each try. So it's good, it's really enjoyable. So unfortunately, since we got no kill, what I'm going to do is just leave the two best try videos playing in the background while I just give you a list of all of the boss's abilities, what we did to try and negate those abilities and avoid them as best as we can, and also hopefully try and give you a bit of an insight as to how you'll kill this boss when it goes to live. So around the outside of the room there are 4 different lightning conduits, and each one of these conduits enables Lei Shen to have a different ability. However, in order for him to gain this ability, he needs to be standing next to the conduit. Once he's been moved next to the conduit, he will begin to charge it with power, and it has its own little energy bar, and when it reaches 100 energy, it will then increase the level of the conduit by 1. Each conduit has a maximum level of 3, and once the level has been dinged, so to speak, so when you go from 1 to 2 and 2 to 3, its energy will reset back to 0, and it will start charging up again like it did at the start. For each level on each conduit, you will either get more damage dealt or a special addition to that ability. If you're charging the North conduit, it will grant the ability Static Shock, and this will inflict 400,000 nature damage, which is split between all the players that are stacked up on the person that has the Static Shock debuff. And as the level of the Static Shock conduit increases, the number of targets Lei Shen puts the Static Shock on will increase, so once you hit level 3, you get 3 people with the debuff on them. This is 1.2 million nature damage, which would then have to be split between the entire raid. However, you don't really need to worry too much about leveling up the North conduit. If Lei Shen begins to charge the Eastern conduit, he will be granted the ability Diffusion Chain, and this will inflict 75,000 nature damage to his first target, and then if people are standing close to each other, which means you need to spread out obviously if you do take him to the Eastern conduit, the chain will jump to other people and it will again inflict 75,000 nature damage. Just remember to stay spread out and only one person will get hit by it, and your healers will be happy bunnies. If Lei Shen begins to charge the Southern conduit, he will gain the ability Overcharge. Now this ability will be targeted on one player, and this player will become rooted in place. After 6 seconds, the overcharge will burst, which will create a circle of electric energy around the player that had overcharge on them, and it will expand outwards around the whole kind of arena that you're fighting Lei Shen in. This will inflict 100,000 nature damage and stun anyone that gets hit by it. However, if you stack up on top of the person that gains the overcharge buff, well, debuff, you will be in what's called the safe zone, and you won't be able to get stunned or take any nature damage. And the final conduit, which is the Western conduit, will grant Lei Shen the ability Bouncing Bolt, and this is a little bolt that will be spawned from Lei Shen, and it will be targeted at a random location on the ground. Now what your players need to do is you need to go and stand where this is going to land. It'll inflict 75,000 nature damage, but it will stop unharnessed power being spawned, and if no one is there to soak the bolt hitting the floor, an unharnessed power will be spawned, and this is a little mob that your tank has to pick up, and it does get very annoying, especially if the bolt bounces again, which is what will happen if no one soaks it, as it will then land again, and it will also spawn more unharnessed powers. Again, as the level of the Bouncing Bolt conduit increases, the amount of Bouncing Bolts that Lei Shen spawns will also increase. And now that we've taken a look at what all of the different conduits do, we'll finally get to move on into phase 1, and you can see why I played AC/DC at the start of this video, and it's because stage 1 is called Thunderstruck. Now this is where Lei Shen will equip his axe, which goes by the name of Thunder, which he will strike you with. Get it? Now I know what they called stage 1 Thunderstruck. And again, he will charge any conduit that he is near during this phase. However, if Lei Shen is not charging a conduit, he will be granted the Discharge Energy buff, and this will increase nature damage to everyone every 0.5 seconds. Now this next ability is for your tanks, and it goes by the name of Decapitate. and what Lei Shen will do is throw his axe with some kind of supernatural force, and this will inflict 3 million physical damage to his target. However, this damage inflicted will be decreased the farther the target is away from Lei Shen. So when he begins to cast Decapitate on the current tank, the other tank has to taunt, and then the first tank has to run away from the boss as far as he can. Druids are going to have a field day with this due to sprint, I know it. If you are far enough away and not going to take all of the physical damage, Lei Shen will just simply maim you, and that's just a little bit of damage. You don't need to worry about being maimed. And Lei Shen's next ability is kind of like Decapitate, except it's for the whole raid. So the ability is called Thunderstruck, and what he will do is he will hurl his axe at a target location, and you'll see where it's going to land, because there's a little white circle on the floor where it will land. And when it does land, it will inflict 1 million nature damage to any nearby enemies. However, again, the further away from the impact point you are, the less damage you will take. And Lei Shen's final ability for phase 1 goes by the name of Crashing Thunder, and this is where he will strike thunder upon every player that's in the raid and inflict 75,000 nature damage every 1 second for 45 seconds. Now this ability ties in with discharged energy as well, because as I've said earlier, if Lei Shen is not charging a conduit, he will discharge electricity, and it will also increase nature damage taken every 0.5 seconds. So these two abilities do tie into each other, and you should be very, very wary of them. Now between phase 1 and phase 2, and phase 2 and phase 3, there will be an intermission, and these intermissions are activated at 70% and 30% remaining health. And boy are these fun! During the intermissions, Lei Shen becomes invulnerable. Oh yes. And he will activate all 4 of the conduits at once. Double the fun, and this will supercharge them and increase their level by 1. Even more fun. Lei Shen can only maintain supercharged conduits for 45 seconds, so the intermission's only 45 seconds, but you've got a whole bundle of fun going on at once, so don't get too excited. Now, the next ability is called Overload Circuits, and this is also taking place during the intermission, because the conduit with the highest charge after the supercharged conduit's intermission expires will become overloaded, and this will disable the conduit completely and take it out of the fight. However, it will leave a debuff in that quarter of the room, and if you go into that, it will inflict 50,000 nature damage every 1 second. Now, it's up to you which conduits you choose to get to the higher levels to get disabled, but only one will get disabled for each intermission, and you need to choose wisely. I think for the first intermission, we decided to get rid of the bolt one. I can't remember which northeast, south or west it was. We got rid of the bolt one, and then in the second intermission, we got rid of the chain one because those two were the most annoying. Now in phase 2, Lei Shen will lose his axe and he will equip his polearm, and this will allow him to do many a different ability. However, he will maintain the discharged energy ability. But his new one of his new abilities that he gains is called Fusion Slash, and this is something for your tanks to look out, as it will slash the target with his polearm, inflicting 400,000 nature damage and increasing damage taken by Fusion Slash by 100% for 45 seconds. Gee, I wonder how many times you're going to have to tank swap during this phase. Lei Shen's next ability in phase 2 is called Summon Ball Lightning, and what this will do is inflict 150,000 nature damage to enemies that are within 6 yards of the ball lightning, and it will create a ball of lightning at their location. Now this ball of lightning will move towards the furthest enemy away from it, and it will inflict increasing nature damage based on the distance it has to travel. So as soon as the ball lightning is heading towards its furthest target, it's best if you all move on top of it so that it doesn't obviously increase your nature damage taken stupid amounts. And Lei Shen's final ability for phase 2 is a Lightning Whip, and this is where he will crack his whip of lightning and it will inflict 500,000 nature damage to anyone that is within 80 yards in front of him. Now this ability is channeled and there is a massive AoE on the floor where you can see where it's going to land, so there is no reason for you to not avoid this. When the whip has been cracked, it will leave the lightning bolts across the floor, which look very pretty and very shiny. And if you walk into one of these, it will inflict 20,000 nature damage every quarter of a second to you. However, you can avoid the lightning bolts by jumping over them, but there shouldn't be any need for you to go over them or go anywhere near them really. And once Lei Shen has reached 30% health, he will then go into another 45-second intermission. However, he will only activate the 3 conduits that are currently working. He won't activate the conduit that got blown up during the last intermission. And again, at the end of this intermission, whichever conduit has the highest level will get blown out for the rest of the fight and won't affect you in any way. And now moving on into phase 3, which is the ultimate phase of this encounter, where Lei Shen becomes the master of both thunder and lightning. He's just a god. He might as well be a god, but he probably is a god. And during this phase he will equip both his axe and his pole arm, wielding both thunder and lightning against all of his enemies. Now, during this phase he will cast the ability Overwhelming Power, and he will consume all electric from the Throne of Thunder, and this will destroy any remaining conduits, which means that you don't have to worry about the 4 conduits that are around the outside of the room throughout phase 3 at all. Now, Overwhelming Power will also cause his melee attacks to inflict 10,000 nature damage over 1 second, so again that's something that your tanks do need to look out for. During this phase, Lei Shen will also cast Violent Gale Winds, and this will push players in a specific direction, and it will inflict 25,000 nature damage every 1 second. So as you can already see, phase 3 is going to become a very, very healer intensive phase. And again, during this phase, Lei Shen will gain the abilities Thunderstruck, Crashing Thunder, Summon Ball Lightning, and the Lightning Whip. Now, the Thunderstruck ability again will inflict 1,000,000 nature damage if you're standing near its point of impact. So if you see the white circle with an axe in it in the ground, then just run away from it as fast as possible. Crashing Thunder isn't avoidable, as it will just damage people for 75,000 nature damage every 1 second for 45 seconds. The Ball Lightning is going to hurt someone quite badly with 150,000 nature damage, and then everybody needs to move together in order to soak the ball so that nature damage isn't increased, as you don't want that during this phase since you've got 25,000 from the Gale Winds, the damage from Thunderstruck going off, and then 75,000 nature damage from Crashing Thunder. It's all starting to add up quite a bit here. And then you've also got the Lightning Whip as well, which is something you've got to avoid. And if you walk into the lightning bolts from the Lightning Whip by accident, you're going to take 20,000 damage every quarter of a second from that, not including any additional damage you might take because of nature damage being increased on you. So yeah, it's all going on in phase 3, but it is manageable. I definitely recommend saving Bloodlust, Time Warp, Heroism for this phase, as well as potions, bandages most likely, and also any form of, I don't know, self-healing that you might have. Paladins just bubble and run away. That's all you do. So that's going to do it for this Mists of Pandaria beta preview video of Lei Shen on 10-man normal mode. We thought the fight was really good. I hope you enjoy it when it goes to live, because it is fun. So as always, thank you for watching, and if you're interested in future Mists of Pandaria beta preview videos, then please do feel free to subscribe to the channel.